A simple act of kindness. The humming of the city was alive in the air as the early morning sun painted golden streaks across the sky. In the heart of Los Angeles, nestled between towering buildings, sat an old-fashioned diner that had survived the test of time. It wasn't fancy, nor was it particularly famous, but it was home to many, especially to the people who found warmth in its freshly brewed coffee and friendly service. Among the dedicated staff was Marie Carter, a 26-year-old waitress with an unwavering spirit. She had worked at Lenny's Diner for 5 years, juggling shifts to support her ailing mother and younger brother. Life hadn't been kind to Marie, but she carried a smile like armor, refusing to let hardship dull her light. On this particular Tuesday morning, Marie was rushing between tables, balancing trays of pancakes and omelets, her brown curls tucked into a neat bun. The diner was bustling, filled with regulars and new faces alike. Then the bell above the door jingled, and in walked a man whose presence shifted the entire atmosphere. Marie nearly dropped the coffee pot in surprise. Standing before her was Keanu Reeves, Hollywood's beloved actor, known not just for his incredible films, but also for his kindness. She blinked, wondering if she was imagining things. Celebrities rarely came to places like Lenny's. People stopped eating mid-bite, their gazes locked onto the star as he quietly took a seat at the far corner booth, away from the crowd. He wore a plain black t-shirt, jeans, and a baseball cap, keeping a low profile. Marie took a deep breath and approached him, pen and notepad in hand. "Good morning, sir. Welcome to Lenny's. What can I get for you?" she asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Keanu looked up, his deep brown eyes warm and genuine. He gave a small smile. "A cup of black coffee and whatever breakfast special you have," he said softly. Marie nodded, writing it down. "Coming right up." She turned away, still processing the moment. It wasn't every day that an A-list celebrity walked into her workplace, and what stunned her the most was how down-to-earth he seemed. As she prepared his coffee, she overheard whispers from customers and even some of her coworkers. Some were starstruck, others skeptical. "What's he doing here? I bet he won't even tip well. He's probably here for some charity stunt." Marie shook her head, ignoring the chatter. She had always believed in treating everyone equally, no matter their status. She brought his order to the table and set it down carefully. "Here you go, sir. If you need anything else, just let me know." Keanu nodded in appreciation. "Thank you. And please call me Keanu." She smiled. "All right, Keanu. Enjoy your meal." She walked away, tending to other customers, but every now and then, she noticed something remarkable. Unlike most celebrities who dined privately or acted superior, Keanu sat humbly, drinking his coffee, occasionally looking out the window as if lost in thought. Then something unexpected happened. An elderly homeless man, Thomas, walked into the diner. He was a regular that Marie always treated with kindness, offering him coffee when she could. Today, however, her manager, Gary, wasn't in a generous mood. Gary, a stocky man with a permanent scowl, marched toward Thomas. "Hey, you can't just walk in here without money," he barked. Marie's heart clenched. Before she could step in, Keanu calmly raised a hand. "I got it," he said, pulling out his wallet. "Give him whatever he wants. I'll cover it." The diner fell silent. Gary hesitated, clearly unsure how to respond. But money was money, and he wasn't about to argue with a paying customer, especially one as famous as Keanu Reeves. Marie, touched by the gesture, quickly approached Thomas and took his order, making sure he was comfortable. "Thank you, miss," Thomas murmured, his voice weary but grateful. Keanu smiled at Marie as she walked past his table. "You take good care of people here," he remarked. Marie chuckled. "I try. Everyone deserves kindness." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. After finishing his meal, Keanu asked for the check. When Marie brought it over, he slipped a few $100 bills under the receipt. She nearly gasped when she saw it. He had left a $1,000 tip. Her eyes widened. "Keanu, this is way too much." He shook his head. "No, you deserve it. People like you make the world a better place." She was speechless, but before she could say more, Keanu stood up, offered her a kind smile, and walked out, disappearing into the city streets. Mary was left standing there, her hands trembling. She had never received such generosity in her life, but her joy was short-lived. Because later that day, her manager called her into his office. Betrayal and the unthinkable. Marie sat in the tiny, dimly lit office of Lenny's diner, her hands folded in her lap, heart pounding like a drum. Across from her, Gary, the diner's gruff manager, leaned back in his creaky chair, arms crossed over his chest. The room smelled like stale coffee and old paper, the atmosphere thick with an unspoken tension. Marie had no idea why she had been called in, but something in Gary's expression sent a wave of unease through her. He let out a heavy sigh before speaking. "Mary, do you have any idea why you're here?" Marie hesitated. "No, sir." Gary's lips pressed into a thin line. He tapped his fingers against the desk, his gaze cold and unfeeling. "What happened earlier with that KeanuReeves character?" Marie furrowed her brows, unsure where this was going. "I served him breakfast, like I do with every customer." Gary scoffed, shaking his head. "And you think that was just any normal customer service?" Marie felt a prickle of defensiveness rise in her chest. "I treat everyone the same, Gary. That's my job." His jaw tightened. "Your job is to follow my rules. You should have told me the moment he walked in. Do you know how much publicity we could have gotten from that? We could have taken a photo, posted it online, made headlines. Keanu Reeves dines at Lenny's." Marie's stomach twisted. She knew Gary was always looking for ways to squeeze every penny out of the diner. But this was ridiculous. "He was just a customer," Marie said, her voice firmer now. "He came here for a quiet meal, not for some publicity stunt." Gary slammed his fist on the desk, making her flinch. "And what about that homeless guy?" He spat. "You let him sit in here like he belongs. You embarrassed me in front of everyone, letting that Hollywood guy pay for his food. Do you have any idea how bad that looks?" Marie clenched her fists. "It looks like kindness," she shot back, unable to keep the frustration out of her voice. "It looks like a decent human being helping someone in need. Isn't that what we should all be doing?" Gary's face darkened. "No, this is a business, Marie, not a charity. And because of you, we lost an opportunity to make money. Do you know how many people are probably looking up our diner online right now? And guess what? We're not even trending." Marie couldn't believe what she was hearing. He wasn't upset about her actual work. He was mad because she hadn't exploited a good man's kindness for personal gain. Before she could respond, he leaned forward, his voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. "I can't have an employee who doesn't know how to follow orders." Her breath caught in her throat. "You're fired, Marie." Silence filled the room. For a moment, she thought she had misheard him. She blinked, trying to process the words, but the weight of them crashed down like a hammer. Her heart pounded. "Gary, please. Save it," he snapped. "Pack your stuff and get out. I don't want to see you in here again." A lump formed in Marie's throat, but she refused to let him see her break. Blinking back the sting of tears, she stood up slowly, feeling the weight of everything pressing down on her. 5 years. 5 years of early mornings, late nights, double shifts, sweat and sacrifice. And just like that, it was over. She turned on her heel and walked out of the office, past the kitchen, past the counter where she had spent countless hours serving customers, past the same table where Keanu had sat that morning. The same table where he had changed everything. The other employees looked up as she grabbed her purse and jacket. Some had pity in their eyes. Others quickly looked away. No one spoke. She pushed open the glass door, stepping out into the cold air. The city buzzed around her, cars honking, people rushing past. But to Marie, it felt like everything had stopped. She took a deep breath, letting the reality sink in. She was jobless, broke, and worst of all, she had no idea what to do next. The long walk home. Marie walked home in a daze. The small apartment she shared with her mother and younger brother was only a few blocks away, but it felt like miles. She had been the sole provider for her family. Her mother, once a strong and independent woman, had fallen ill 2 years ago, her medical bills piling up faster than Marie could pay them. Her brother, Jordan, was only 14, too young to work, too young to understand the full weight of their struggles. Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to cry. She couldn't. She needed a plan, a way to pay rent, a way to keep food on the table. As she climbed the steps to her apartment, the door creaked open before she even reached for the handle. Her mother, Lisa, stood in the doorway, concern etched into every line on her tired face. Mary. Marie forced a smile. "Hey, Mama." Lisa's gaze flickered over her face, immediately sensing something was wrong. What happened? Marie swallowed hard, stepping inside. The living room was small but tidy, the air filled with the scent of lavender. Her mother's favorite candle. Jordan sat on the couch, his nose buried in a textbook. Marie hesitated for only a second before exhaling. "I lost my job." Lisa's face paled. "What?" Jordan's head shot up. "Wait. What?" Marie sat down, running a hand through her curls. "Gary fired me. He didn't like how I handled a customer." Lisa's hands trembled as she sat beside her daughter. "But Marie, how are we going to?" She cut herself off, biting her lip, not wanting to say it out loud. Marie knew exactly what she meant. How are we going to survive? Jordan stood up suddenly, fists clenched. "That's not fair. You worked so hard for them. You're the best waitress in that place. Why would they fire you?" Marie shook her head. "Because I did the right thing instead of what Gary wanted." Silence fell over the room. Lisa reached for Marie's hand, squeezing it gently. "We'll figure something out. We always do." Marie wanted to believe that, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure. The unexpected call. That night, Marie lay in bed staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She needed a miracle. And then, her phone rang. Frowning, she picked it up, glancing at the screen. It was an unknown number. Her heart skipped a beat. Usually, she would ignore it, but something in her gut told her to answer. With a deep breath, she pressed the phone to her ear. "Hello." A familiar voice came through the line, smooth and kind. "Mary, this is KeanuReeves." Her breath hitched. "I heard what happened. Meet me tomorrow. I have an offer for you." Mary sat up so fast, she nearly dropped the phone. Her heart pounded as she whispered, "An offer?" Keanu's voice held a quiet certainty. "Yes, something that might just change your life." Marie clutched the phone, disbelief washing over her. She had no idea what he meant. But deep down, she knew. This was only the beginning. The offer that changed everything. Sleep was impossible that night. Marie lay in bed, staring at the cracked ceiling of her small bedroom, her mind racing with possibilities. KeanuReeves called me. The thought alone felt surreal. Just hours ago, she had been drowning in despair after losing her job. Now, a world of unknown possibilities had opened up before her. What kind of offer could he be talking about? Was he offering her a job? A financial helping hand? A chance to escape the struggles she had faced for so long? As the city outside hummed with life, Marie sat up in bed, her fingers gripping the edge of her blanket. No matter what, she had to meet him. She had nothing to lose. A new beginning or a cruel joke. The next morning, Marie dressed in her best outfit, simple but presentable. She had no fancy clothes, no designer shoes, nothing that screamed Hollywood ready, but she wasn't about to pretend to be someone she wasn't. She kissed her mother on the forehead, told her she'd be back later, and assured Jordan that she was fine. Then she set off to the meeting place Keanu had texted her, a small cafe on the quieter side of the city. As she stepped inside, she spotted him immediately. Keanu sat at a corner table, dressed in his usual laid-back style. Dark jeans, a plain black t-shirt, and sunglasses perched on his head. Despite being one of the most famous actors in the world, he blended in effortlessly. When he noticed her, he stood up and greeted her with a warm smile. "Marie, you made it." She managed a nervous chuckle. "Of course. I mean, it's not every day you get a call from Keanu Reeves." He laughed, motioning for her to sit. "I figured you'd have questions." Marie sat across from him, her hands folded on the table. "Yeah, just a few. Like, why me? Why did you reach out?" Keanu leaned forward slightly, his expression sincere. "Because I saw something in you. The way you treated everyone at the diner. The kindness you showed without expecting anything in return. It's rare. And when I heard you were fired because of it, I couldn't just ignore it." Marie swallowed hard, still struggling to process it all. "That's really kind of you, but what exactly is this offer?" Keanu smiled knowingly. "How would you like to work for me?" Her heart stopped. "What?" she whispered, convinced she had misheard. "I have a small foundation," he explained. "It's focused on helping people, especially those who've been dealt a rough hand in life. We fund shelters, community programs, and outreach initiatives. I think you'd be perfect to help manage some of our projects." Marie blinked. "You want me to work for your charity?" He nodded. "I need someone who understands struggle, someone with a real heart for people. And I saw that in you." Marie's mind reeled. This wasn't just some charity case. He wasn't offering her money out of pity. He was offering her a purpose. "But I don't have experience with things like that," she admitted. "I've been a waitress my whole life. I don't know how to run projects or manage anything on that scale." Keanu smiled. "You're smart, Marie. You've been managing people, finances, and difficult situations at that diner for years. Trust me, you're more qualified than you think." She bit her lip, emotions swirling inside her. The idea of leaving behind the exhausting, soul-crushing world of minimum wage jobs for something meaningful, it was overwhelming. Keanu must have sensed her hesitation. "I'm not saying you have to decide right now," he said gently. "Think about it. Meet the team. See if it feels right for you." Marie nodded slowly. This wasn't just a lifeline. This was a chance to change everything. "I'll do it," she whispered before she could second-guess herself. Keanu's smile widened. "Welcome to the team, Marie. A whole new world." 2 days later, Marie found herself in an office unlike anything she had ever known. Keanu's foundation, the New Dawn Initiative, was located in a modest but beautiful building just outside of downtown. It wasn't some massive, impersonal corporate office. Instead, it felt warm, filled with people who genuinely cared about making a difference. Mary was introduced to the team: social workers, project coordinators, volunteers, all working toward a shared goal: helping those who had been forgotten by society. Her first task was to assist in organizing a food drive for a local shelter. At first, she felt out of place, unsure of what to do. But soon, she realized that this was just like the diner. Instead of serving food to paying customers, she was making sure those with nowhere else to turn had a hot meal. And it felt incredible. Day by day, she grew more confident. She helped organize events, visited shelters, listened to the stories of people who had lost everything. She learned their names. She heard their struggles. And for the first time in her life, she felt like she was making a difference. The moment she never expected. One evening after a long day at work, Keanu invited her to join him for coffee. They sat on a quiet balcony overlooking the city, the golden hues of sunset casting a warm glow over everything. "You've done amazing work, Marie," Keanu said, sipping his coffee. "I knew you'd be great at this." Marie smiled, feeling the warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. "I can't thank you enough for giving me this chance." He shook his head. You earned it. You've always had the heart for this. You just needed the opportunity. She stared out at the horizon, a lump forming in her throat. You know, when I lost my job, I thought it was the worst thing that could happen. But now, I realize it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Keanu nodded, his expression thoughtful. Sometimes, life pushes us out of where we're comfortable, so we can grow into who we're meant to be. Marie took a deep breath, letting his words sink in. He was right. She had spent her whole life struggling, waiting tables, barely scraping by. Now, she was changing lives. And in the process, she had changed her own. As the stars twinkled above them, she made a silent promise to herself. She would never stop paying kindness forward. Because sometimes, the worst day of your life turns out to be the start of something extraordinary. Rising from the ashes, Marie had always thought that her life was destined to be a continuous cycle of struggle, one where she barely scraped by, constantly on the edge of survival. But now, as she stood inside the bustling headquarters of the New Dawn Initiative, she realized something powerful. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was finally living. The past few weeks had been a whirlwind. She had gone from pouring coffee at a diner to managing projects that put food on the tables of hundreds of struggling families. Every morning, instead of dreading another long shift at a thankless job, she woke up with purpose. And it was all because of Keanu Reeves. The man who had once been just a face on a movie poster was now her mentor, her guide, and most of all, her friend. But as she was about to learn, even new beginnings came with challenges. The resistance against change. Not everyone was happy about Marie's presence at the New Dawn Initiative. Some of the employees, particularly the ones who had been there for years, resented her. "Who is she?" whispered Christine, one of the senior project managers. "Just some random waitress Keanu found in a diner. What does she even know about running a foundation?" Marie overheard the whispers. At first, she tried to ignore them, but they stung. She knew she wasn't as experienced as some of the others. She knew she still had a lot to learn. But was that really a reason to doubt her dedication? She threw herself into her work, determined to prove them wrong. When the team struggled to secure funding for a new homeless shelter, Marie personally met with local businesses, using her natural charm and real-life experience to convince them to donate. When a single mother broke down in tears at one of their food drives, embarrassed to be accepting charity, Marie sat with her, held her hand, and told her own story of struggle, reminding the woman that needing help was never something to be ashamed of. Slowly but surely, people started seeing her differently. The same coworkers who had doubted her began respecting her. Christine, the senior project manager who had been one of Marie's harshest critics, approached her one afternoon. "I misjudged you," she admitted, crossing her arms. "You're not just some waitress. You're the real deal." Marie smiled. "I'm just someone who knows what it's like to be on the other side." Christine nodded, and from that day on, she became one of Marie's biggest supporters. An unexpected blast from the past. One evening, as Marie was leaving the office, her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was from Lenny's Diner, her old workplace, the place where she had been fired for being too kind. Her heart pounded. Why would they be calling her? She let the call go to voicemail. A few minutes later, she got a text from Ava, one of her old coworkers. "Marie, please call me. You won't believe what's happening here." Curiosity got the best of her. She dialed Ava's number, and within seconds, her friend picked up, sounding breathless. "Marie, oh my God, I've been trying to reach you. You're not gonna believe this." Marie leaned against a street lamp, gripping her phone. "What's going on?" "It's Gary," Ava said, her voice brimming with excitement and karma-fueled satisfaction. "He's been fired." Marie blinked. "Wait, what?" Ava let out a laugh. "Yeah, word got out about how he treated you. A couple of customers who were there that day posted about it online, and it went viral. People were furious. The diner started losing business. Badly. The owners got so much heat that they fired Gary to save the restaurant. Marie's mind spun. She never expected justice to come knocking like this. Wow, she murmured, unsure how to feel. He totally deserved it, Ava continued. But guess what? The owners are looking for a new manager, and she hesitated. They asked me if I could reach out to you. Marie's stomach twisted. Wait, what? They want you back, Marie, as manager. Marie almost dropped her phone. For years, she had worked herself to the bone at that diner, never once getting the recognition she deserved. Now, the very people who had cast her aside were begging her to come back. But something in her heart told her no. She had outgrown that place. I appreciate it, Ava, Marie said, a soft smile forming. But I've moved on to something bigger. Tell them I wish them the best, but I'm not coming back. Ava let out a whistle. Dang, girl. Power move. I love it. Marie laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. For the first time in her life, she wasn't looking back. A surprise from Keanu. The next day, Marie arrived at work, still riding the high from her conversation with Ava. She stepped into her office. Yes, she had her own office now, and found something waiting on her desk. A sealed envelope with her name written in elegant handwriting. Frowning, she opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter from Keanu. Marie, I knew from the moment I met you that you were meant for more. I wanted to give you a chance, but you proved yourself beyond anything I expected. You have built something incredible here, and I am so proud of you. Because of that, I want to make this official. You're no longer just a project coordinator. As of today, you are the new director of community outreach. You are now a leader in this foundation, and I trust you to take it even further than I ever could. Congratulations, Keanu. Marie's hands trembled as she read the words. Tears filled her eyes. She had gone from being fired in a greasy diner to running an entire department of a charity that was changing lives. And it was all because of one act of kindness. She clutched the letter to her chest, letting out a shaky breath. She had finally found where she belonged. And for the first time in her life, she knew she was going to be okay. The power of paying it forward. Marie sat at her desk, staring at the letter from Keanu Reeves, her fingers tracing the ink as if it would help her believe it was real. Director of Community Outreach. Just months ago, she was taking orders and refilling coffee cups at a diner where she was undervalued and overworked. Now she was in charge of projects that directly impacted the lives of people who needed help the most. She blinked back tears. This wasn't just a promotion. This was proof. Proof that she had worth, that she had a purpose, that she mattered. Taking a deep breath, she folded the letter carefully and placed it in her top drawer. It was time to get to work. More than just a job. The role of Director of Community Outreach was no small feat. Marie was now responsible for overseeing multiple programs, homeless shelters, food drives, rehabilitation programs, job training initiatives, and even youth mentorship projects. At first, it was overwhelming. She had never held a leadership position before. She had no formal education in business or charity management. She had learned everything in the real world, through struggle and hardship, and for the first time, she feared that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't good enough for this. But Keanu's words stayed with her. You've been managing people, finances, and difficult situations for years, Marie. Trust me, you're more qualified than you think. So she did what she had always done. She worked harder than anyone else. She woke up earlier, stayed later, took on responsibilities that weren't even in her job description. She personally visited shelters, sat down with struggling families, listened to their stories. She didn't just read reports. She felt the reality of their situations. And it changed her. One evening, she met a young girl named Elena at a shelter. She was only 6 years old, curled up in a corner, clutching a tattered teddy bear. Marie knelt beside her, offering a warm smile. Hi, sweetheart. I'm Marie. What's your teddy's name? Elena hesitated, then whispered, Hope. Marie's heart clenched. Elena's mother, Rosa, approached and explained their story. She had fled from an abusive household with only a few belongings. No job, no home, and barely any money. Marie knew that pain. She had seen it in her own mother's eyes years ago when they struggled to keep their home. That night, Marie made a silent vow. She would do whatever it took to help families like Elena's find safety, stability, and a second chance. This job wasn't about money or status. It was about changing lives. And she was going to give it everything she had. Keanu's next big surprise. One afternoon, Keanu invited Marie to lunch at an outdoor cafe. He had been keeping an eye on her progress, and it didn't take long for him to notice that she was thriving. "You've done an incredible job, Marie," he said, sipping his tea. "Better than I ever could have imagined." Marie blushed, still not used to hearing such high praise from someone like him. I just want to help people. The way you helped me." Keanu studied her for a moment, a proud smile forming on his lips. "That's why I have another offer for you." Marie blinked. "Another one?" Keanu leaned forward, his voice filled with excitement. "I want you to help me expand this foundation internationally. We've been focusing on Los Angeles, but there are people all over the world who need this kind of support. I want to open more shelters, fund more community projects, and create programs that can reach even more lives." Marie's breath hitched. International expansion. She had barely wrapped her head around leading the local programs, and now he wanted her to take this global. She swallowed. "Keanu, I don't know if I—" He cut her off gently. "Mary, you once thought you weren't qualified for this job, but look at what you've accomplished. You are the heart of this foundation. You understand struggle in a way most people in leadership positions never will, and that's exactly why you're the right person for this." Tears pricked at Marie's eyes. She had spent so much of her life doubting herself, believing she wasn't good enough, smart enough, or worthy enough of success. But Keanu had seen something in her before she had even seen it in herself. And now she had a choice. Stay comfortable, running the program she had built in Los Angeles, or take a leap of faith and change the world. Marie wiped at her eyes and let out a shaky laugh. "If we're really doing this, we're going to need a lot more coffee." Keanu grinned. "That's the spirit." Returning to where it all began, before launching the international expansion, Marie made a decision. She wanted to visit Lenny's diner one last time. Not as a struggling waitress, not as someone who had been fired and discarded, but as the woman she had become. She walked into the diner, the familiar smell of frying bacon and coffee filling the air. The new manager, a woman she didn't recognize, looked up. "Table for one." Marie smiled. "No, just visiting." A few of her old co-workers recognized her, their faces lighting up. "Mary, oh my God, look at you." She exchanged hugs and stories, catching up with the people who had once been her family. Then, as she turned to leave, she caught a glimpse of her old table, the one Keanu had sat at the day everything changed. For a moment, she just stood there, letting it all sink in. She had walked into this diner as a struggling waitress with no direction. And now, she was about to change the world. Marie took one last deep breath before stepping out into the sunshine, ready for whatever came next. A legacy begins. As Marie stepped out of Lenny's diner, she took a deep breath, inhaling the crisp Los Angeles air. She had spent years walking out of this very place with exhaustion weighing her down, wondering how she was going to make it through another day. But today, she walked away lighter, not because her burdens had disappeared, but because she had transformed them into purpose. She glanced at her phone. A message from Keanu flashed on the screen. "Meeting tomorrow at the foundation. Big plans ahead." She smiled to herself. Big plans, indeed. A new world to conquer. The next morning, Marie arrived at the New Dawn Initiative headquarters earlier than usual. She wanted a moment alone before the chaos of the day began. Sitting at her desk, she stared at the map pinned to her wall. It was covered in red dots, each one representing a future project site for the foundation. New York, Chicago, Miami, and now, thanks to Keanu's vision, London, Paris, Mumbai, Nairobi, Mexico City. Marie exhaled slowly. Expanding internationally was more than just a job. It was a revolution. She pulled out her notepad and started listing ideas. Shelters for single mothers, job training programs for the homeless, education initiatives for underserved communities, mental health resources for struggling individuals. For hours, she lost herself in her work, scribbling notes, mapping out partnerships, and imagining a world where no one had to struggle alone. A soft knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. Keanu stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Figured you could use some fuel," he said, handing her one. Marie grinned. "You read my mind." He sat down across from her, taking a sip of his drink. "So, how are you feeling about all of this?" Marie exhaled. Excited, terrified, overwhelmed, but mostly ready. Keanu smiled. "That's all I needed to hear." He slid a folder across the desk. "I have something for you." Marie opened it, eyes widening as she scanned the contents. It was her official contract as the Chief Director of Global Outreach. Her hands trembled. "Keanu, this is a formality," he interrupted. "You've already proven yourself. This just makes it official." Marie bit her lip, emotions swirling inside her. "I don't know how to thank you." Keanu chuckled. "You already have, by proving that kindness can change the world." She signed the contract, feeling the weight of what she had just committed to. There was no turning back now. The first mission, a country in crisis. The expansion plan officially kicked off in Mexico City. The foundation had been alerted to a growing crisis. Thousands of families had been displaced due to economic hardship and violence. Entire communities were living in makeshift shelters, struggling to survive. Marie boarded a plane with her team, ready to be on the front lines. When they arrived, the reality of the situation hit her like a punch to the gut. Children ran barefoot in the streets, their bellies empty. Mothers held babies wrapped in nothing but torn blankets. Elderly men and women sat outside collapsed homes, their eyes hollow from exhaustion. This wasn't poverty on paper. This was human suffering, and it needed immediate action. Marie wasted no time. She divided her team into groups. One team distributed food and clean water. Another worked on setting up medical camps. A third team partnered with local volunteers to build temporary housing. Marie personally went from tent to tent, listening to people's stories, offering reassurance, and making sure that no one felt invisible. A woman named Isabel, holding a newborn in her arms, grabbed Marie's hands, tears streaming down her face. "You don't know what this means to us," she sobbed. "No one ever comes to help. We are forgotten." Marie's heart clenched. "Not anymore," she promised. She knew this wasn't a quick fix. It would take months, even years to rebuild what had been lost. But this was a start, a message that shook the world. 3 weeks later, Marie sat on a makeshift stage, addressing a crowd of people in Mexico City. Journalists from all over the world had gathered to report on the foundation's work. Marie stood at the podium, the wind rustling her hair. Cameras flashed, microphones were shoved closer, but she ignored them all. Instead, she looked at the people, the real people, the ones who had been left behind by society. She cleared her throat. "I was once like many of you," she began, her voice steady, "struggling to get by, unsure of where my next meal would come from, living paycheck to paycheck. I know what it's like to feel invisible." The crowd listened in silence. "But I learned something powerful," she continued. "Kindness has the power to change everything. One act of compassion, one hand reaching out, can set off a chain reaction that transforms lives." She glanced at the cameras, knowing this message would reach people far beyond Mexico City. We live in a world where we are taught to chase wealth, power, and fame. But real power lies in lifting each other up. It lies in choosing empathy over apathy. She looked out at the people, her people. You are not forgotten. We see you. We stand with you. And we will not stop until the world does too. The crowd erupted into applause. Some cheered, others wiped away tears. Mary felt her own eyes welling up. This wasn't about her anymore. This was a movement, a private moment of reflection. That night, Marie sat on the rooftop of their temporary headquarters, staring at the twinkling lights of the city. Keanu joined her, handing her a bottle of water. You did good today, he said, sitting beside her. Marie smiled. We did good. Keanu nodded, gazing out at the horizon. Do you ever think about how different things would be if I hadn't walked into that diner? Marie chuckled. Every single day. He turned to her. If you could go back to that moment, when you were fired, would you change anything? Marie thought for a moment, then shook her head. No, because that was the day my real life started. Keanu smiled. That's what I thought you'd say. Marie leaned back, feeling the weight of the stars above her. She had come so far, and yet she knew this was only the beginning. The legacy of kindness. The stars stretched endlessly above the city skyline as Marie sat in quiet reflection. So much had changed. She had gone from a struggling waitress to leading a global movement, from pouring coffee at a diner to pouring hope into the hearts of thousands. But despite the success, the long nights, and the battles won, Marie knew one truth: the fight was far from over. The New Dawn initiative had started with a simple idea: kindness has power. And now, that idea had spread across continents. They had built shelters in Mexico, funded education programs in India, established food banks in Kenya, and rehabilitated struggling families in New York. What once seemed impossible was now a reality. But Marie couldn't shake a feeling deep inside her, a pull. There was one last thing she needed to do. Returning to the beginning. 1 month later, Marie found herself on a plane back to Los Angeles. Not for business, not for an event. This time, she was coming home for closure. When the wheels touched the runway, a lump formed in her throat. It had been almost a year since she had been fired from Lenny's diner. A year since her life had unraveled, only to be rewoven into something greater than she had ever imagined. She didn't waste time. The next morning, she stood outside the diner. It looked exactly the same. Faded signage, greasy windows, the comforting aroma of bacon and coffee wafting through the air. She hesitated, her hand hovering over the door handle. And then, with a deep breath, she pushed it open. The bell jingled overhead, the sound instantly familiar. But this time, she wasn't here to serve. This time, she was here to give back. The surprise announcement. The new manager, a woman in her 40s named Renee, recognized Marie immediately. Mary Carter, she gasped, setting down her order pad. I heard about you. You're all over the news, helping people all over the world. Marie laughed softly. I try. As soon as the staff realized who she was, they gathered around her, eager to hear about her journey. Some of her old coworkers, Ava, Pete, and Riley, embraced her, eyes shining with pride. Then Renee folded her arms, giving Marie a curious look. So what brings a world changer like you back to our little corner of the city? Marie took a deep breath. I came to give something back. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, setting it on the counter. Renee opened it, flipping through the pages. Her eyes widened. This is... Marie nodded. I bought the diner. Gasps filled the room. Renee's hands trembled. Wait, you mean you own Lenny's now? Marie smiled. Not just me, all of you. She gestured to her former coworkers. Every single employee is now a co-owner. This place will never be controlled by someone like Gary again. No one will be fired for doing the right thing. No one will be treated like they're disposable. From now on, this diner will be a place of kindness, respect, and opportunity. Silence hung in the air. Then, Ava burst into tears. Pete let out a stunned laugh. Riley clapped a hand over his mouth, speechless. Renee flipped through the contract again, reading the words over and over. "Mary, you don't have to do this." Marie's eyes softened. "I know, but I want to." She looked around at the place where her hardest moments had unfolded. And yet, if not for those struggles, she never would have met Keanu. Never would have discovered her purpose. Never would have started the movement that changed thousands of lives. It all started here. And now it was coming full circle. The grand reopening. A month later, Lenny's Diner reopened under a new name. The Hope Cafe. And this time, it wasn't just a place to grab breakfast. Marie made sure that every single night, the cafe would serve free meals to the homeless. She partnered with the New Dawn initiative to offer jobs to people who needed a second chance. Instead of just another diner, it became a symbol, a place where kindness and second chances lived and thrived. And on opening day, KeanuReeves was the first customer. He walked through the doors, looked around at the changes, and gave Marie a grin. "I gotta say, this is a much better reason to visit than just breakfast." Marie laughed, shaking her head. "You started all of this, you know." Keanu raised an eyebrow. "Oh no, you started this. I just happened to be lucky enough to see it unfold." Marie smiled, realizing he was right. This was never about one act of kindness. It was about the chain reaction it had set off. Because kindness is contagious. And what started with a simple meal in a quiet diner had become a global movement. A future without limits. Years passed. Marie's name became synonymous with change. The New Dawn initiative grew beyond what anyone could have imagined. Hundreds of shelters, thousands of jobs, millions of lives changed. But despite all of that, Marie never lost sight of her roots. Every year, on the anniversary of the day she was fired, she returned to the Hope Cafe. She put on an apron, took orders, and served meals, just like she used to. Because she never wanted to forget where it all began. And every year, when a struggling customer walked in, feeling lost, hopeless, and invisible, Mary sat with them, listened, offered them kindness, and, if they were ready, she gave them a chance. Because sometimes, all it takes is one act of kindness to change a life forever. And Marie Carter was proof of that.